The High Court has ruled that employees can legally ban trans women from female toilets. Activists sought to challenge the guidance that states public bodies should segregate public toilets and changing rooms based on biological sex rather than self-declared identity. The legal slapdown was a resounding victory for women's rights groups and gender-critical charities. But if ever we need a reminder that this debate still rages on, new guidance was published stating that primary school pupils will be allowed to change their gender. Though confirming that teachers must consult parents before a child's request to transition, the women's rights campaign group Sex Matters came out against the guidance, saying it would encourage a dangerous fairy tale. Joining me now to discuss these issues is the Director of Campaigns for Sex Matters, Fiona McAnena. Welcome to the show. Let's start with the first thing. There was a court case this week. Please tell us what happened.
So the Good Law, so-called Good Law Project, brought a legal challenge against the statement that the Equality and Human Rights Commission had put out last year, after the Supreme Court said, if it says man, that means male people. If it says woman, that means female people. There's no mixing those two up. The Equality and Human Rights Commission put out an interim statement to help people figure out what their legal responsibilities were, and that applies to employers who must provide single-sex toilets and changing rooms, and also public services, theatres, any public place who don't have to. But if they do, then the women's one is only for the female people. Now, we all used to know this. It wasn't difficult or complicated. But the Good Law Project didn't like it, and they brought a legal challenge, which was heard late last year. And we got the verdict on Friday, and the verdict was, it was all dismissed. Everything the Good Law Project said was dismissed as irrelevant. The law stands. What the Equality and Human Rights Commission had said was all lawful. It makes perfect sense, and we all know it.
Well, Fiona, sorry, I'm just a little bit confused because I don't understand what's going on here, because the Good Law Project put out a statement saying, oh, actually, we've got a bunch of victories for trans women. They said there's some other stuff that's bad, but actually there's some really good stuff that's come out of this case.
Yeah.
What's going on there then?
They've already put out a crowdfunding appeal for more money, both to pay the costs that they have to pay because they lost this case, and they estimate that could be £300,000, and to raise money to appeal this case, and no idea how much that might be. So basically, they're already using this to try and raise money to go back to court. So clearly, if they'd won, they wouldn't need to go back to court. They wouldn't need to pay the other side's costs. But they made some strange claim that the case didn't say what it did say. But anyone can read the judgment. It's not that long. It's very clear.
Well, I would recommend people search a person called Michael Ferran, and he has written a sort of breakdown of their claims coming from the Good Law Project. And essentially, one by one, shows that things were taken out of context. He makes the accusation that this is a sort of almost willful misreading of the verdict. Now, the reason why this is important, and I understand that they are activists and they are pushing for what they see as trans rights, but when you have an organisation that is pushing out what some people would argue borders on misinformation, and that gets out to MPs. Now, this is the thing. I've seen a bunch of MPs essentially taking this Good Law Project statement and saying this is the truth of it, when it doesn't seem to be that that's the case. And that's dangerous, right? It's
very irresponsible. I mean, we already have people arguing that the Supreme Court judgment last year is not clear when it's perfectly clear. And now we have MPs saying that the Good Law Project somehow have won a victory. But the leader of the Good Law Project himself made a video in which he starts by saying, the court will tell you that we lost, the media will tell you that we lost, but what comes after the but isn't very convincing, except that they want to raise more money.
Yeah, I just because I'm not a legal expert. I'm not particularly intelligent. It was very easy for you to read it, and you read it, and it looks all nice and swish, and you go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I don't really understand. And then I had to read this Michael Ferran article, and it sort of have to break it down, and it was very frustrating to have to use up all of my intellect to try and make sense of it. But yes, it seems like this was a definitive loss. And
completely.
And to present it otherwise is a misrepresentation.
Oh, completely, without doubt. It's a definitive loss. And if you take any half a sentence out of context, you can try and make it mean the opposite of what it really means. But there's no doubt the whole point was they wanted to say the Equality and Human Rights Commission got it wrong, and the judge said, no, they didn't.
OK, so it sounds like a bit of wishful thinking.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GB News discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GB News to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Let's talk about the other story this week. Finally, after it feels an eternity, it is actually it's 8 years, isn't it? I think since we were going to be getting the official advice for schools about how to deal with gender non-conforming children. What do you think about it? I think some people have concerns that there are good things, there are bad things. What's your personal read?
Yes, I think that there's a lot in it to welcome, but there's a loophole. And that loophole is a big problem. So what's good about it? First of all, instead of special guidance about gender questioning children, which is what was drafted under the previous government, this guidance is within the safeguarding framework. So that's the right place for it. You know, there aren't special children who need special rules. What there are boys and girls at school who all need to be looked after, educated and kept safe. And so in this guidance, it says you must record their sex properly, honestly, because otherwise you can't keep them safe. That's progress. It says teachers and schools may not initiate any conversation about transition or gender or
Which has happened at my children's school, where teachers have raised this stuff and said, oh, my friend, they were a boy and now they became a girl. You're telling that to 5-year-olds. That's, you know, you're indoctrinating them.
Yes, and that's particularly worrying because teachers who do that often will not tell the parents. And again, this guidance says you must tell the parents. And it also says if a child is thinking that they are somehow entitled to, you know, pretend to be the other sex, they need to understand they cannot use the toilets, the changing rooms, they cannot participate in the sport of the other sex, they cannot go in overnight accommodation meant for the other sex. So on the face of it, you'd say, finally, some common sense. But the problem is the chink of light that's been left for those activist teachers. Because there is then a little piece in there about, although social transition, as they call it, should be very rare, there is the possibility of that. And they don't say what that means. It doesn't. So we know that those children cannot use the opposite sex facilities, and yet there is still the possibility that a child who's a boy might present at school as if he's a girl, and that other children may be told that this is a girl.
And then we're talking about 4-year-olds. As well, or going all the way down to the age of 4.
Well, potentially. And you know, it even talks about the fact that the children with the biggest problem are the ones who are what they call in stealth. And Dr. Hilary Cass also talked about this. So if you have little 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, they can turn up at school, and honestly, depending on what they're wearing and how their hair is, it's hard to tell the boys and girls apart. Of course, puberty is the big reveal, isn't it, when there's no fooling anyone. And so what you have is children who've been sent to school. Their parents have told the teachers that they're the other sex, that some children will know, some children won't. It's basically a big lie that is being imposed on everyone in that school. And as they get older, it starts to become a real worry for those children because they're constantly terrified that someone will find out the truth. And this is what they mean by in stealth. Now, that's a terrible position to put a child in. And the problem with this guidance is it still doesn't rule that out.
Yeah, and arguably it's indoctrination. If they are there's being by stealth, but if they're also just, there's nothing that specifically, is there anything in here that just says that this should not, I mean, you said it shouldn't be talked about, but I've seen pictures of trays from people's schools, for primary schools, you know, they put their art in those trays and they've got pronouns like he, him on the trays. This is indoctrination for the children, and it's allowing these activist teachers, and let's not be naive that they're not out there. They exist, and they are trying to put their ideology into children's brains. Is there anything in there that says, this is wrong, you cannot do it?
No, and I think this is the problem. It's a sign of how embedded this whole ideology is, that they have not quite had the courage to say no. They've said, yes, you must register boys as boys and girls as girls, but they haven't had the courage to simply say, no child can pretend to be the opposite sex at school, and that cannot be kept a secret from anyone. And that's what they should be saying. They should be saying, you know, these children just need to grow up and be whatever they want to be. But the one thing they can't do is change sex. And it's actually very unkind and misleading for any adult around them to tell them that they can. And as you rightly say, there are activist teachers. And, you know, for the other children in the school, arguably just one child who is supposedly transitioning is enough to say this can happen, it's a thing. It sows doubt. It's a bit like, I would say this guidance is like a peanut-free treat where it's labelled 99% peanut-free, right? If you have a peanut allergy, 99% peanut-free is not good enough. If there's 1% peanut in there, well, that's what this guidance is like. It's full of good sense. If there are any
nuts, it's a boy.
Yeah. But all the way through this guidance, they say you have to know their sex, they shouldn't be in the wrong sex toilets, the parents have to be involved, the teachers mustn't raise it, and then suddenly they say social transition can happen. So it's not good enough. Because,
again, Bridget Phillipson, this was sat on for such a long time, and there are some significant things that were taken out from the original legislation, to my understanding of it. How do you think that is going to fit in with, because also sitting on the desk is the EHRC guidance, the final guidance now. So do you think that they're going to fudge that as well?
Well, there are two things to say about what's just happened, and these two things are connected. So it feels like this school's guidance has left enough space for the puberty blockers trial to happen, because the National Health Service is going to treat 200 children and block their puberty, and those children will be at school pretending that they're the other sex. So it feels like they've had to do this guidance in order to let that happen. Of course, we don't know whether that trial will happen because there's a legal challenge against that. But
well done, by the way, to Kira Bell, who I believe has stopped.
Kira Bell and James Esses have put a mark on it. In Northern Ireland. Yes, they have. They have very sensible schools guidance in Northern Ireland. It's only a page long. It says boys are boys, girls are girls. Never forget it, more or less. And they've stopped children from Northern Ireland taking part in this puberty blockers trial. And that case will be heard here in the UK to apply to the rest of the UK. But the other thing to say about the EHRC guidance is it was rumoured that they were waiting for the result of this Good Law Project court case, and we've had that now. And that has clearly said whatever the EHRC said about what the law meant, their interpretation was legally sound. So there is now no barrier, should be no reason for that guidance not to be published.
So we'll see if it actually does finally emerge. Well, thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause, please. Fiona McNamara. I forgot, I wanted to say something. I know last time you were on, you were talking about your book, Turf Island. What's the subtitle? Turf Island?
How the UK resisted trans ideology. How
the UK resisted trans ideology. It's on audio as well as an audio book. I would highly recommend it. Even if you're not interested in the whole, like, trans stuff. This is about how activists fight back. It's an incredibly interesting book. So thank you very much for joining us. Next, wait a minute, let me say, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said the new guidance would deliver pragmatic support for teachers, reassurance for parents, and above all, the safety and well-being of children and young people. And the Good Law Project director and founder said, this wave away of workplace gossip, evidence of what is meant to be outed is increasingly transphobic and violent society, was deeply troubling. I urge the judiciary to listen harder to what trans people say about what their lives have become. The GLP said it planned to appeal against the decision.